But I never thought I would actually come to a place where I find it's even worse. Germans don't really do that.
They don't know what to do, where you invest in my space. They don't talk about like how they.
Once you scratch that layer,
I find them sometimes they can't think out of the box. So people are pushing and taking the space, and especially.
Would you say the people here in Berlin are different than people in other parts of Germany?
Yeah.
If you see Berlin from a cultural perspective, you have to think about three things. First,
How would you describe the German culture?
In my case, I think they are like very cold. I noticed that normally Germans don't say what they're thinking about it. They are polite. They are always like very correct way. And I noticed that they still have this charge, this heavy weight in their shoulders, what happened with the First and Second War. So they are like all the time very correct, don't say it what they thinking, really know it, and take it time to really express on it. I come from a culture that when you meet someone, you just give a hug in the first time, and I notice how they just immediately just put the back and put the hand in front, and I don't care, I just give the hand and then hug it. And at the beginning from them are like super tense, they don't know what to do, why are you invading my space? But with the time when we have like more contact, they know that I'm gonna hug them and they start to hug, they know how. But they don't talking about what they feel. They don't talk about like how they, either if you ask them like, how are you? In their brain, and like, why you ask me about my life? Who are you to ask me about my life? Why I need to tell you about my life? Like they have all reserves all the time. It's complicated to really know what a German people or friend is thinking in the true, honest way.
I have to say that I am anyway quite surprised because having a Brazilian background, I found Holland always quite a dry place. From like how people communicate with each other.
Dry in the sense of a bit cold, or?
Yeah, a bit cold, a bit distant, very diplomatic, which is also good. But I never thought I would actually come to a place where I find it's even worse. Not like, not to speak badly about it, but I find that German people are very individualistic, even more than Dutch people. In the sense that Dutch people will still look you in the eye when they're passing by. Germans don't really do that. And yeah, I find it a bit hard to cope with sometimes, especially when somebody, for example, asks me something on the streets and I don't happen to know, they will just walk away. It has happened to me a few times. There's no thank you, there's no good day, they just walk away and okay, well, it's what it is.
I find them sometimes a bit too uptight, not in a bad way, it's just how they are, how they were brought up. Because I'm from Czech Republic, I would say we have really good sense of humor, and I like people who can make fun of themselves, which sometimes Germans can't, or I think it's more that they were never brought up like that. They don't understand that if you make fun of yourself, life will get easier. They like to be pünktlich, which I like, on time. And on the other hand, when I travel the world, I hate German tourists. And I'm sorry, the hate, I don't like them. They are quite difficult. It's like
In what way?
they don't respect they are in a different country, and sometimes they behave a little bit superior. Which I don't let them. I'm like, no, we are all tourists here. We're all on the same boat. We're doing all the same things. You're not better than we are.
I mean, whenever we talk about culture, there are stereotypes that come into my mind. Stereotypes are not generally, not necessarily untrue, but they are only half of the truth, which I don't feel really, comfortable about. But I could still mention a few. So when we talk about German culture, the first thing that comes into mind is the directness, the bluntness of the Germans, the bureaucracy, the food, which I actually like, and then the complexity of the language.
Yeah, and something also that I really appreciate about Dutch culture, despite it being quite like it's quite dry, but I think there's a lot of humor also in the dryness. That like Dutch people know of themselves that there's not like a lot of emotion or something going on, but because of that, you can kind of be ironic with a lot of things. And I miss a bit of humor here. I feel like people, of course, we've been here only for 4 months, so there's still a lot to discover. But until now, I find people very serious.
You have anything to add on this?
I have nothing to add on this. It was extensive and, and quite accurate. Yeah, Germans being a little bit distant and close to open up easily to others. But yeah, once you scratch that layer, you discover another world, and that's amazing. Yeah, German culture, being at the beginning very cold, it can be very warm as well and very welcoming, and it's funny.
It'll take a lot of time.
Do you know what Germans value? Some typical German values in life?
Follow the rules.
Follow the
They love to follow the rules. They love to make cues. This is something very weird for us. We know order. They like order, follow the rules, make cues. You know, like. So I think sometimes they make you without knowing why they are making a cue.
Organization, organizing everything, and well, what I learned from my friends is that since kids they have everything organized and everything needs to develop as the plan. That's the idea I have. I don't know if I'm right or if I'm wrong, but that's one of the values I can see, and it's good for life. I mean, there are a lot of chickens without a head that are lost in life, but never a German.
I find German people, because I've worked with Germans many years, I find them sometimes they can't think out of the box. So 1 + 1, it's always 2, but you know, sometimes it can be 2+ or 2-. So if there is a problem and you need to sort something out, they are like, no, we always did it this way, so we will always do it this way. It doesn't work, but we will do it this way, which drives me completely bonkers. And I think Czech people, because I still grew up in communism, we always had to improvise, we didn't have things. So, you know, if something happens, you try to find plan B, plan C, which I find Germany doesn't have it. You go shopping here, people are pushing and taking the space, and especially the elderly people sometimes can be aggressive, or they don't have the patience. Sometimes you're like, oh my God, what did I do?
Would you say the people here in Berlin are different than people in other parts of Germany?
Yeah.
In what way?
As he said, Berlin is not Germany. Berlin is so multi-culti that it has developed a lot of different cultures, right? And it's more warming, more welcoming, and anything can happen here. I think, of course, there are Germans, for sure, but maybe a little bit open to other people and to other costumes and to everything. I think they are more used to foreigners.
Yeah, but I think like at the same way, like the real Germans just live around Berlin, you know, that in this periphery, and inside of Germany there is like there is like a lot of culture in that way. You can go outside in the streets and you can hear all the languages: English, French, Spanish, Italian, like Portuguese, all of them. And then you start to listen a few German. You go to places and try to ask something in German and they immediately ask you in English, you know, like, sorry, I don't speak German. That is cool for us in that scenario, to be honest, because we still don't speak like fluently German. You don't need it here. If you try it to speak German, they just change it immediately to the English because they notice that you are not like fluent in German. But Berlin is the Babel Tower. Like everything. This is something that in the moment that I will go from here, we're gonna miss. You can find all the cuisines here. All the food around the world is here, you know, like little festivals, little culture things from around the world. You have space to express here. So yeah, Berlin is another kind of capital. I was living a few times in Paris, Barcelona, Mexico City, different capitals. Berlin is the most weird and amazing capital that I ever lived. You have everything. That's very cool.
Unlike other cities, if you think about Berlin, or if you see Berlin from a cultural perspective, you have to think about three things. First, the German culture in Berlin. There are tiny bits of Berlin where you still have the stereotypical German culture that you might have in your head. You can still find it in the suburbs of Berlin. But then there is this German overall culture of Berlin, which is a blend of German culture and international culture. International culture in a sense that people who come to Berlin and live here, they have this stereotypical understanding of in Berlin, and they bring that and it embeds into the actual culture that it is here. So then you have this typical Berliner thing that's created with that blend. But then you have subcultures inside Berlin, and different districts you have subcultures which are influenced by people who live there and who come from a certain background.
Yeah.
So you have to know where to live in Berlin to understand the culture. You have the Berliner German culture, the German stereotypical culture that you have, and then you have this Arab culture, Turkish German culture, Arab German culture, American German culture, and the district that you live in that also has its own characteristics and tiny aspects of culture.
And when you talk about Berlin culture, Berlin specific culture, what do you mean by that? How would you say is the Berlin culture?
The first thing that would come into one's mind about Berlin or seeing it different from other cities is that you could wear anything, you could do anything, and you could look ugly, and people won't care. So that's what comes into your mind. The second element that we don't have anymore, unluckily because of the war and conflict that's going on in Ukraine, is that it was comparatively extremely cheap. When you come to Berlin, you wouldn't have to worry about spending too much money, unlike other big cities, which is kind of not there anymore, but still the cost of living are fair compared to other cities.
Now when it comes to Berlin culture, in what way would you say Berliners are different than other parts of Germany?
I think this is great culture for people because I mentioned it again before, people are very individualistic here and people don't care about the other things, which becomes very popular. Like I have a niece and nephews and they want to be all the same, and I think that's wrong, and here it's completely opposite. So if you want to be a DJ or dancer or who you want to be, just be, and people don't judge you here, and I love it. You know, if you don't make it, you don't make it. If you make it, that's great. Berlin still it's very arty and it never sleeps, which is the same in London. I know there are drugs and alcohol, but yeah, everybody needs to find their own experience they want to have. But I think the techno and the clubbing scene in Berlin is really big. And in London, you go to a club, you have to queue and you have to have heels or you have to have this and that. And it just started to be like, I don't want to do that. And here, so many small bars and coffee shops. It's just everywhere you go, it's different. That's also what I like about Berlin. There are not big chains. You go to restaurants which are family-run businesses, a lot of Asian, which are not even from Asia, but you know, it's very colorful. You can find so many new things every day here. I like that very much.